A labor strike, it's gotta be one of the most powerful tools employees have. But wow, it exists on a razor's edge. Get one thing wrong, and a legally protected protest can turn into an action that costs you your job. So today, let's dive into the official rulebook for this very high-stakes game.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to cover the only 2 reasons you can legally strike. Then, we'll walk through the mandatory 7-step gauntlet you have to survive. We'll look at the common pitfalls that can totally derail a protest, figure out who really pays the price when things go sideways, and then reveal the government's ultimate trump card. And we'll wrap it all up with the one final rule you absolutely have to remember.
Okay, first things first, you can't just decide to go on strike because you're having a bad week or you don't like your boss. Nope, the law is incredibly specific, and it only gives you 2 valid reasons to do it. Everything else, it's completely off the table. The legal definition itself gives us our first huge clue. It's a temporary stoppage because of a labor dispute. Now, that second part is everything. So what exactly counts as a legit dispute that actually gives you the right to walk out? And here they are, the only 2. That's it. On one side, you've got a CBA deadlock. A collective bargaining agreement, or CBA, is where you negotiate things like wages and benefits. A deadlock is when those talks just completely hit a wall. On the other side, you have an unfair labor practice, or ULP. That's a serious one. It's when an employer violates the fundamental rights of its workers. And let me be crystal clear, fighting between unions or squabbles inside a union, not a valid reason to strike, period. Okay, so you have a valid reason. Great, but that's just the start. Now you have to navigate what I call the 7-step gauntlet. And this isn't just a suggestion, it is a mandatory, non-negotiable process where you have to be perfect. This number right here, it says everything about how high the stakes are. It's not about getting most of it right. You miss just one procedural step, and the entire strike can be declared illegal in a heartbeat. And the fallout from that, it's severe. All right, so here's the mandatory checklist. You have to file a notice of strike and then wait out a cooling off period. After that, you need a strike vote, and it has to be approved by a majority of the entire union membership, not just those who show up to vote. Then you report the vote, and there's another waiting period. Finally, the strike itself has to be peaceful. If you miss any of these, like in the Filipino Telephone Corp case where they filed the notice on the same day as the strike, the whole thing is illegal from the jump. And that brings us right to our next section, because that last step, using legal means, that's where so many strikes, even ones with a good reason, go completely off the rails. You can have a just cause, you can follow all the steps perfectly, but your actions during the strike can flip its legal status just like that. A super important concept here is free ingress and egress. It's just a legal way of saying people have to be able to get in and out of the company freely. So a picket line where you're holding signs, totally legal. But a human barricade that physically stops people or deliveries from getting through, that's a prohibited act, and it can make the whole strike illegal. Now, this one is a bright line rule. No gray area here. Any kind of violence, coercion, or intimidation just poisons the entire thing. The second that things like shouting, insults, getting physical with non-strikers, or creating a dangerous environment start happening, the strike loses all its legal protection. The means absolutely have to stay peaceful. Okay, this one's fascinating. The slowdown. This is where employees don't actually walk out. Instead, they just all agree to work super slowly to kill productivity. The courts have this great name for it, a strike on the installment plan. And it's illegal because it goes against the basic deal. A fair day's work for a fair day's wage. This is a perfect example of a creative protest totally backfiring. In this case, hotel employees all shaved their heads bald in protest, which was against the company's grooming standards. The court said, look, this isn't just individual expression. This was a coordinated action designed to disrupt business, and that made it an illegal strike. So let's say a strike is declared illegal. The protest is over. What happens next? This is where we get to the consequences, and the law makes a very, very important distinction between the leaders and the followers. It seems like a simple question, right? When a strike is found to be illegal, who actually gets fired? Is it just everyone who is out there on the picket line? Well, the answer is a lot more nuanced than you might think. Here it is. This is the absolute key difference you have to understand. For a union officer, a leader, just knowingly participating in an illegal strike is enough to lose your job. The standard for them is much higher. But for an ordinary union member, just being there isn't enough.
They can only be dismissed if they personally committed illegal acts like violence or blocking the entrance. It's a really critical protection for the rank and file. But what if a strike, legal or not, starts to paralyze an entire industry that's critical to the country? Well, that's when the government can step in and play its ultimate trump card. It's an intervention that basically overrides everything. It's called an assumption of jurisdiction, or an AJ order. For any industry that's considered essential to the national interest, we're talking transportation, power, hospitals, the Secretary of Labor has this immense power to just step in, take control of the whole dispute, and effectively shut the strike down. The moment an AJ order is issued, three things happen automatically, and they are not negotiable. One, the strike stops immediately. Two, every single striking employee has to return to work. And three, the employer has to take everyone back under the exact same conditions that existed before the strike. It's like a mandatory reset button. And here's the crucial point. Defying a return-to-work order is an absolute no-go. It's considered an illegal act all by itself. And as the Philcom Employees Union case showed, it's a valid reason for dismissal for anyone who defies it. Doesn't matter if you're an officer or a member. You do not mess with this order.
Whew. Okay, we've covered a ton of ground, right? The reasons, the whole process, the pitfalls, the consequences. So let's boil it all down to the single most important rule to remember when we're talking about who gets held liable. For anyone out there trying to make sense of labor laws, students, union leaders, anyone, this is the memory hack you need. It's simple, it's effective, and it gets right to the heart of who's on the hook. Just remember, okay, am I? Let's break it down one last time so it really sticks. Okay, officers are liable for knowing participation in an illegal strike. Am I? Members are only liable if they commit illegal acts. If you walk away with nothing else, just remember, okay, am I? And that leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? The right to strike is held up as this incredibly powerful tool for workers. But as we've just seen, it's surrounded by this maze of super strict rules and procedures, where one tiny misstep can cost you your livelihood, which really makes you wonder, with a process this demanding and consequences this severe, how protected is this fundamental right in practice?